Welcome into the Pursuit of Manliness podcast, where we are vigorously equipping men to pursue biblical manliness. My name is Jarrett Samuels. I'm the host of the podcast. Men, as always, I'd like to begin by thanking you for checking out today's show. Whether you're watching this on YouTube, listening to this wherever you grab your podcast audio content, thank you for checking it out. When you get the opportunity, visit thepursuitofmanliness.com. You can find this podcast episode, the whole catalog of 400 plus podcast episodes. You can see what's available in the gear store, learn more about our fall men's retreat, learn more about the herd, etc. I do want to remind you that the Wednesday podcast is sponsored by Loader Road Goods out of Coshocton, Ohio. Now, I'm going to be honest. I just looked up Loader Road Goods, clicked on the shop button, and now there's a cell phone holster there. Now, there was a period of time where I wore my phone on my belt, and there were some young guys that made fun of me. I got to tell you, it's massively convenient to have it on your belt. You call it a holster, that's a game changer. But that wasn't what I was planning on talking about. I recently got this guitar strap from Chris Kent from Loader Road Goods, and it is a fantastically made guitar strap. Now, here's the deal. I don't play guitar. So I've been giving these out to a couple people that I do know play guitar, and they love it. Well made. It's got the Loader Road Goods stamp on there. You put in the discount code, A Quiet Life, all capital letters, you'll save 15% off your order. Men, it's time for today's podcast episode. So a few months back, I was reading Genesis, and maybe many of you were reading Genesis a few months ago. But there was something that stood out in Genesis chapter 31, just the way Jacob and Laban are phrasing their faith and using that phrase, using this narrative as really what's solidifying this odd bond and covenant between them as they begin to depart from each other. I'll read it. I'll read the two portions that stand out to me, and then I'm going to explain to you why I think this is important for a quiet life episode. Genesis 31:42. The God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been on my side. Surely now you would have sent me away empty-handed. God saw my affliction, the labor of my hands, and rebuked you last night. We'll go down. Verse 53. The God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge between us. So Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. There's two things that stand out, and I think they're both connected together, okay? So the first thing is the God of. The second thing is the fear of his father, okay? So verse 42, the fear of Isaac. Verse 53, the fear of his father Isaac, okay? Those two things are connected together. The God of Isaac. Who is the God of Isaac? Well, he's the God of Isaac's father, Abraham. He's the God of Jacob. He's the God of, you get the idea that this is a multi-generational faith that has been passed down. And Jacob and Laban are tethering their faith, their understanding of who God is, to those who have come before them. Nahor even makes his way in there in verse 53. And then there's the fear of factor. And so part of the covenant, part of the bond that these two are making together, again, they have a terrible relationship. And they are going to be separated now. This is it. They're making this strange covenant, and his sons are watching it, his daughter's watching it, everyone there is observing this. And what is solidifying this covenant is the faith of those who come before them. There is a heritage of faith before these two men. A heritage of faith that is the prominent focus in the pact or the covenant promise they're making to one another, the deal that they're striking amongst one another. Two guys who specialize in being deceitful say, well, how are we going to solidify this promise between us? The faith that's been handed down to us. I wrote a blog post when I first started writing blogs, and I don't know if it ever became a podcast. Maybe it has, I don't know. And it was just called The Art of Storytelling. So as I read throughout the Old Testament, there is a continual reminder put on the people of Israel that in the future when this happens, in the future when they ask about this, in the future when you come to this, there was a story to be told based on your walk with the Lord. So when they say the God of whomever, you realize you can just peel those onions back. The layers, not the onions, the layers of that onion back. And the more you peel, the more understanding you get to and say, the God of going into Egypt and saying she was my sister. The God of Hagar, right? The God of the famine, the God of Isaac, the God of, the ram caught in the thicket to be sacrificed. There's so many things that go into our life. And if our life is lived in the healthy and holy fear of the Lord, then it's the God of that illness. He's the God of that job loss. He's the God of that church issue. He's the God of whatever these things are. If you're walking with him, then he is still the God of those things. Now, whether we acknowledge it or not, he still is. Okay, that is a bit of semantics there. My point is, in those moments when you acknowledge him as such, as Jacob and Laban are doing here, you're paying him the respect due his name and the fact that his presence has been there the entire time. And so the only thing that these two can really agree on is the God of, and then they start to put names with that. There is a heritage of faith. Do you have a heritage of faith? I feel like most men I encounter do not. Or not a heritage of faith that you would say is substantial enough that we could build upon it. There might have been an awareness of God. There might have been a conversation about God. There might have been a fear of don't get out of line because, God's watching, or, you got to get to church because whatever. I mean, some of those things aren't necessarily bad in and of themselves, but that's not necessarily a heritage of faith. And then some guys are like, not at all. We had nothing. Like it, either I didn't know my father, or he was, an atheist, or, whatever. He was antagonistic toward those of faith or whatever. So for some guys coming to faith, you're the first one. You're the first one. And others, you might have a line of some other people. I hate to say it, I feel like it's pretty rare. If you do have that, I've said a number of times, God does not waste a life. But he especially doesn't waste a life well lived for him, where there is a spiritual baton of faith that is intentionally passed on so that you can continue to run that race with perseverance. You can take what that person did, and with fresh legs can run even faster. You see, when you do the what do you call that? The relay race, right? I did track for a minute. It was a bad idea, but I did track. My friends were doing it, so I did it. I went out, and I was in the relay race. I did hurdles. I did long jump. I did whatever they threw me into. And the key to that relay race is the baton, right? You drop that baton, it's over. If someone ran as fast and as hard as they could to make their lap or quarter mile or whatever your thing is, and they put that baton in your hand, hopefully in a firm way that, how when that baton it's slapped in that hand and people practice that exchange and they work on it. Yeah, there's some mistakes, but eventually they get it, and eventually they get the rhythm down of like, when you get to here, I'm going here, I put the baton in your hand, and then you run. And when that person runs, they run with fresh legs. Have you ever seen the person who just put the baton in someone's hand? They're exhausted. They have nothing left. And they usually, kind of double over a little bit, grab their knees, shorts, whatever, and they're winded. And oftentimes, then they look up and they want to see how the person they just gave the baton to. Have you ever seen them hand that baton off and then only realize that person has either squandered the lead, fallen further behind, or just plumb dropped the baton because it hit him in the hip, the shorts, whatever? You ever see what happens? It's devastating to that individual. We've talked a lot about Hebrews 12:1, that we're surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses. I believe there's a cloud of witnesses, those who've gone on before us. Some of them maybe some of them we don't know. Because there's people in your life, I'm sure, who have implored you from a distance or prayed from you from a distance, and maybe you weren't even aware of it. And they've gone on to glory. They're gone on to be with Jesus, and I think they're cheering you on, going, come on, man. Run as fast and as hard as you can. All you have to do when you're in a relay race is not necessarily pace yourself. Yes, you want to get to where you need to go, and a good runner understands what they need to have in the tank to get to that place and when their kick is and all that. However, your main job is do your job. Go as fast and as hard as you can to get to that next place, whether it's the finish line or to the next person with as much effort and focus as possible. I look at Jacob and Laban and I'm like, how did you all miss it so bad? I mean, Jacob, he's a frustrating individual, but it gives me hope because God changed his name to Israel. He changed his name. He gave him the 12 sons. He continued to go before him. He continued to provide for him. You got Joseph going into Egypt. You got, basically saving that line because Joseph was a slave, rose to number 2 in Egypt. Jacob and his family get to go there. They get to live there. And so I can say, God just continually went before him. So if you feel like you've blown it, you're like, man, someone did pass the baton on to me and I really made a mess of it. Get in the kick. Do what you got to do. Kick it in high gear. Dig a little deeper. Use a little more effort. Go all in. We have been given, whether it was by a specific individual or from the Lord himself, a heritage of faith to be proud of and to share with somebody else. It is a tremendous blessing to give everything you have to the Lord. And by doing so, people around you will get that baton of faith slapped firmly in their hands. There are times we need to be reminded of those who were conduits of the gospel before us. I think sometimes we forget that. Think back. Who was the person that shared the gospel with you? Man, do it for them. Do it for the people who need you to share the gospel to them. The gospel came to you because it is intended to go to somebody else. If someone has firmly slapped that baton of faith into your hand, run with it, man. I think it's good to pause and reflect on that and realize that they did that so that you would continue to run further and faster. I've never poured into anybody that I didn't want to outrun me. I don't mean that literally, I'm not running anywhere, but I've never poured into anybody that I want you to get it and I want you to do far more. I want you to win more people. I want you to be more bold. I want you to be more courageous. I want you to, whatever it needs to be, I want you to make a lot less mistakes than I did. I've never invested in someone else. I want you to outrun me. It's never been like, hey, now don't you pass me now. No, go. You run. There have been people in my life who have slapped that baton of faith into my hand. And when they look at this list, the God of Abraham, the God of Nahor, the God of Isaac, these are not men who had easy lives, but these are men who walked with the Lord. And most of the people you're going to meet in life, they've not had an easy life. But some of them have walked with the Lord. I would say for some of you guys, that's your story. Maybe for most of you, you have not had an easy life, but you're trying to walk with the Lord. Now for you guys that you're the first leg of this race, nobody put that baton in your hand. Nobody sat you down and had that conversation. Nobody walked you through Scripture. Nobody made sure you got to church and understood why we're doing that and what we're about. Nobody explained to you some of these things, the foundations of the faith. You're the first person. And you think of this relay race idea, that first person really does set the tone. Because that first person, if they stumble or if they don't get out of the gate right or whatever, it's a bit of a challenge for those who follow. 2, 3, and 4 got a lot of ground to make up. If that first person stumbles, and I'm not trying to put pressure on you, but I will, you got to get it right. If you're the first one, some of you are the only one, and you got to get it right. So to get it right, you better get around some other people who are trying to get it right. If you've had someone slap that baton of faith in your hand, then you have a responsibility to run further and run faster. Be a conduit of what they've done, and you don't waste their life. Over where I do this podcast inside my house, and there's one in the garage where I do that in the garage, and there's one in my office. I have a baton. I never use this in a real race, not a shoot the gun off, run the laps, timey race. But I'm using in a spiritual race. This to me is a strong reminder of the baton of faith that was put in my hand. I don't want to drop the baton. I don't want to run slower because I have an advantage of the person that put it in my hand. I don't want to tap out of the race. I want to run further. I want to run faster. And I want to run with everything that I have, everything that I am, knowing that this race is not about me, but I have a responsibility in it. The outcome What comes of that, I don't know. I'm one leg in this race. And this baton was firmly slapped into my hand and said, go do this. And so I have a responsibility to take this baton and slap it into the hands who come after me and say, now get a better time. Run faster. Run further. And you don't run faster and further because I checked out or I had a bunch of reserves. No, I'm going to give it everything I got, hoping that you're better than me. Hoping that you're less flawed than I am. Hoping you're less self-centered than I am. Hoping that you are not having to overcome the things that I'm overcoming. I want you to run as fast as you can because I put this baton in your hand because this matters. What an incredible story to have these guys sitting around here who are just a mess, but they have a heritage of faith. They have a baton of faith that was put in their hand. And man, if you've been given that baton, run. Run as well as you can run. If you're the first leg of this race and you're the first one to do this, I want to say, welcome to the race, man. We can't have you tap out too soon. We can't have you quit. We need you to run as fast and as hard as you can run with the vision of putting this baton in other people's hands so they'll take it and they keep running. Amen. Man, I appreciate you guys who listen, who watch. I appreciate above all you guys who keep pursuing biblical manliness.